In the endless silence of space, there was a small station floating above a forgotten planet. It was old, made of rusted steel and flickering lights, and most people didn't want to be posted there. But Jake Mason didn't mind. He liked the quiet. He liked fixing broken things. And more than anything, he liked staying away from the noise of Earth. War had changed everything, especially the way humans looked at aliens. But this station was one of the few places where humans and aliens worked side by side. Peace was still new, still fragile, and full of mistrust. Yet somehow, in the middle of that cold silence, something began to grow. Jake first saw her during a storm drill. Her skin was smooth and silver blue, glowing faintly under the station lights. Her eyes, bright like ice, were always alert. She was tall, strong, and moved like a shadow, always quiet, always watching. Her name was Veyla, and she was nothing like anyone Jake had ever met. They never spoke at first. They didn't need to. She worked in security. He worked in maintenance, but their paths crossed more than expected. Sometimes in the mess hall, sometimes in the loading dock, and sometimes, when Jake was working late, he'd hear soft footsteps and find her standing behind him, watching silently. She never said a word. She only nodded once and walked away. Jake wasn't afraid of her. Most humans were. They'd seen too much during the war. They thought all aliens were dangerous, cold, and violent. But Jake saw something else. In her silence, there was peace. In her eyes, there was pain. It was on the 34th day of his posting that something changed. There had been a pressure leak in the lower wing. Jake rushed in with his tools, sealed the line, and began resetting the oxygen flow. Just as he turned, a heavy pipe broke loose from above. He heard the crack, but didn't move fast enough. Then, suddenly, he wasn't on the floor. He was on the ground, pinned, but unhurt. A shadow had leaked between him and the falling pipe. Veyla. She had pushed him out of the way and taken the hit on her shoulder. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She stood there, holding the pipe like it weighed nothing, and then tossed it aside. Jake stared at her, wide-eyed, heart pounding. She turned to him. Without speaking, she stepped forward and touched the center of his forehead with 2 fingers. It lasted only a second. Then she walked away. Jake didn't understand what that meant. He stood there, frozen, the warmth of her fingers still on his skin. That night, he couldn't sleep. He replayed the moment again and again in his head. Was it a thank you, a warning, or something else? The next day, he found something strange outside his room. A small mark had been carved into the metal door with something sharp. It looked like a symbol, a circle with 3 lines, and below it, a shape that looked like a star falling sideways. Jake didn't recognize it, but when he showed it to a translator in the command deck, the answer shocked him. "It's written in Old Kalari," the officer said, frowning. "That's her language." "What does it mean?" Jake asked, heart thudding. The officer looked uncomfortable. "It's your name. The first part of it, anyway. In their culture, names aren't written unless there's a bond. A deep one." Jake didn't ask anything else. He just nodded and walked away, his thoughts spinning like a broken fan. Later that night, something even stranger happened. He was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when he felt something. Not a noise, just a presence. He sat up slowly. The hallway light outside his room flickered, casting long shadows through the window in his door. There, standing just outside, was Veyla. She didn't knock. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, staring at him through the glass, her glowing eyes calm, unreadable. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jake could feel his heartbeat in his throat. He didn't know what to do. Say something. Open the door. Then, without a sound, she turned and walked away. Jake got up and stepped into the hall, but she was already gone. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She passed him in the corridor and gave the same small nod she always did. But now, Jake saw it differently. There was something behind that nod. A message. A secret. From that day on, he started noticing things. She always chose to stand near him during briefings, even though there was more space on the other side of the room. When they walked past each other, her eyes lingered just a second longer than before. One evening, when Jake was working in a dark corner of the ship's engine room, he turned to grab a tool and found it already there, placed silently beside him. He looked up. No one was there. She had left it for him. Jake tried to tell himself it was nothing. Maybe it was her way of saying thank you for saving her that one time. But deep down, he knew it was more. He could feel it, like a quiet energy moving between them. But still, they didn't speak. Weeks passed. The station moved through asteroid fields and alien signals. Missions came and went, but the silence between Jake and Veyla remained strong, almost comforting, like a promise that didn't need words. Until one day, everything changed again. Jake had just finished a long systems check and was heading back to his room. As he turned the corner, he saw something carved into the wall beside his door. Another symbol. It was different this time, a curve shaped like a flame, surrounding a star. Beneath it, the same 3 lines from before. Jake stared at it, breath caught in his chest. He didn't need a translator now. He understood. It wasn't just a name. It was a bond, and it was growing. The silence in space had a weight to it, not the silence of emptiness, but the kind that follows a question with no answer. That was the silence Jake carried with him after seeing the second symbol. He hadn't touched it, hadn't dared to trace its shape with his fingers. It felt sacred, like something not meant to be disturbed. Every time he walked past it, he could feel her eyes somewhere behind him, watching, waiting. But she said nothing, not with her mouth anyway. Her messages came in the form of symbols, small gestures, and that endless silence that now felt full of meaning. Jake wanted to talk to her. He wanted to ask what the symbol meant, what she meant. But every time he saw her, his words fell apart before they reached his mouth. And she remained quiet, calm, and distant, like a wave just out of reach. One day, orders came through from command. A derelict alien ship had been discovered on a moon with a toxic atmosphere. The ship was old, half buried in rock and ash. It didn't belong to her people or any known race. Command wanted a small team to explore it, gather data, and return before nightfall. Jake was selected as the engineer. To his surprise and secret relief, Veyla was chosen as security escort. The ride down to the moon was rough. Thick clouds of ash rolled over the sky, and the ground was jagged with sharp black stones. Their landing craft touched down with a screech, and the door hissed open to reveal a landscape that looked like it had been burned in 1,000 fires. The alien ship stood like a broken skeleton in the middle of the valley. It was massive, dark, and covered in strange markings. The air was barely breathable, even with their gear. As Jake stepped inside, a chill ran down his spine. Something about the place felt old, not in years, but in memory, like it had been waiting. Veyla said nothing as she followed him inside, her eyes scanning every shadow. Jake flicked on his wrist light and moved deeper into the corridors. The walls were covered in the same type of markings she had carved by his door, only older, more worn. He stopped in front of one, heart racing. It looked just like the first symbol, his name. But beneath it was another symbol he didn't recognize, a triangle with a crack through it. He turned to Veyla. Her eyes were wide, her skin visibly tense. For the first time since they'd met, she looked afraid. "What is this place?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and touched the cracked symbol. A soft humming sound filled the air. Lights flickered down the corridor, revealing a large chamber ahead. Jake stepped forward, but Veyla stopped him with a hand on his arm. He looked at her. She was shaking her head. Jake had never seen her hesitate before, not even in danger. But now, something in her eyes was different, fear mixed with memory. He stepped back. She moved ahead instead. Inside the chamber, the walls were covered in more markings, but these weren't random. They formed patterns, rows, shapes like maps. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it sat a stone-like object. Veyla walked toward it slowly, her eyes locked onto it like it was calling her. Jake stayed back, watching her body stiffen with every step. Then, as her fingers touched the stone, it glowed. A pulse of blue light shot through the chamber walls. Symbols on the stone lit up, one by one. And then a voice spoke, not in sound, but inside Jake's head. It was low, distant, and ancient. He couldn't make out the words, but he felt them. Pain, war, loss, and something else. A warning. Veyla fell to her knees. Jake rushed to her side, catching her before she hit the ground. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, lips trembling. She whispered something in her language, something soft and fast. He held her tighter. "I've got you," he said. "You're okay. I'm here." For a moment, she seemed to see him again. She blinked, focused, and gripped his sleeve. Her lips moved slowly this time, more clearly. "Don't trust the past," she said in broken English. Jake didn't know what she meant, but he helped her up. They had to leave. The chamber walls were vibrating now, humming like a warning bell. Something had been triggered. They ran. Outside, the ash storm was worse. The sky had turned red. The ground shook as they reached the ship. They'd barely made it inside before the valley split open with a violent quake, swallowing half the alien ship. Back aboard the station, Jake helped her to the medbay. The medical staff began scans, but Veyla refused to be treated. She stood up before the machines could finish and left the room without a word. Jake followed her. She didn't go to her quarters. She went to the observation deck, a quiet place at the top of the station, where stars stretched forever across black space. Jake entered slowly. She stood near the window, arms crossed, back turned to him. He said nothing at first. Then, quietly, "You knew that ship." She nodded once. "Why didn't you tell command?" She didn't answer. "Why didn't you tell me?" Still nothing. Jake took a step closer. "You left a symbol on my door. You knew what it meant to your people. You carved it anyway. Why?" Veyla turned to him slowly. Her eyes were different now, not calm, but torn. She opened her mouth, and for the first time, he heard her voice clearly. "I wasn't supposed to feel anything." Jake didn't speak. She looked down. "We don't. We're not allowed to bond. Not with humans." "But you did," Jake said, almost whispering. She looked at him, something fragile in her expression. "I don't know why." He took another step forward. "Then tell me what that symbol means." "The second one. The one with the flame." Veyla hesitated. Then, very quietly, she said, "It means connection. One soul reaching toward another." Jake swallowed hard. The air felt heavy between them. "I need to understand," he said, "because I feel it too. I felt it since the day you looked at me." Veyla took a deep breath and turned her face back to the stars. Her voice was a whisper again. "There's more than you know, Jake. My people, they don't just punish bonds like this. They erase them." He blinked. "Erase." "If they find out," she said, "they'll make me forget. Make you forget. It will be like we never existed." Jake stepped beside her, his heart pounding. "Then we won't let them." Veyla didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. Outside, a star flared in the distance, bright and sudden, like a spark in the darkness. And as its light flickered across the glass, Jake realized something deep inside him had already changed. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of words that didn't need to be spoken. And somewhere, in that quiet space between fear and feeling, a bond had begun. Time moved slowly on the station after the mission to the moon. The tremors that shook the alien vessel were gone, but something else remained, something unspoken. Jake felt it in the way Veyla avoided his gaze, how she no longer stood near him during briefings, how her footsteps had grown quieter than before, even though they had always been soft. The silence that once comforted him now felt heavy, like a curtain pulled between them. He didn't understand why she was pulling away. He thought they had taken a step forward. He thought she had let him in. But now, it was as if she had closed a door without a sound. Jake didn't give up. He studied her language every night, using old recordings and fragments gathered from old alien archives. He kept a notebook filled with drawn symbols and half-formed meanings, trying to make sense of what she had said, of what she hadn't said. His dreams were filled with glowing corridors and her eyes, always watching, always distant. One night, he was working alone in the lower maintenance wing when the lights flickered again. It happened often in that part of the station, but this time it felt different. The air felt colder. When he turned around, she was there, standing in the doorway, her figure half-shadowed by the dying lights. Jake didn't say anything at first. He didn't want to scare her away. "I didn't think you'd come," he said after a moment, voice low. She stepped forward slowly, her silver-blue skin dim under the flickering light. "You tried to learn my words." Jake nodded, a little breathless. "I had to. I needed to understand you." Veyla walked to the table and picked up the notebook he had left open. She traced her fingers over the lines he had written, stopping at one symbol. She tapped it twice, then looked at him. "This one," she said, "means more than you think." Jake stepped closer. "What does it really mean?" She hesitated, her fingers still resting on the page. "It means longing, a silent ache for something you're not allowed to want." Jake felt his chest tighten. "Is that what you feel?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and began to walk toward the exit. "Wait," he said, his voice louder than before. "Please don't go." Veyla paused in the doorway, not looking back. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Come with me." He followed her without hesitation. She led him through the station, past quiet halls and locked chambers, until they reached the observation wing again. But this time, she didn't stop at the glass window. She opened a hidden hatch he didn't know existed, leading them to a narrow, unused platform outside the main hull. Only a thin barrier field separated them from the stars. The view was breathtaking. An endless sea of stars, galaxies like clouds, and the soft pulse of a dying sun in the distance. The silence here was purer than anything he had ever known. And standing in it beside her, Jake felt like the universe had paused just for them. She didn't speak for a long time. "I used to dance here," she said finally. "Before the war. Before I became what they made me." Jake turned to her, surprised. "Dance?" Veyla nodded. "In our culture, we dance to honor memories, to speak without words." Then, slowly, she stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the metal platform. Her movements were fluid, like wind across water. She raised her arms, spun gently, and let her body speak what her voice could not. The stars became her audience, and Jake stood frozen, watching her dance with aching wonder in his chest. It wasn't a performance. It was something sacred, and it was for him. When she finished, she stood still, facing the stars. Jake walked up beside her, his voice trembling. "Why did you show me this?" She didn't look at him. "Because I can't hide anymore." Jake turned to her. "Then don't." She met his gaze, and for the first time, there were tears in her eyes, small and bright like pieces of light. He wanted to reach for her, but something held him back, a final wall between them. "My people will come for me," she said. "I wasn't supposed to be here this long. They will want to finish what they started." Jake's voice was low, full of quiet rage. "What did they start?" She looked away. "They promised me to someone. A prince. Someone I did not choose. When I refused, I ran. I thought I could hide here. But I was wrong." Jake stepped in front of her. "You don't belong to anyone." Veyla blinked slowly. "If they find out I've bonded with a human, They won't just come for me. They'll come for you too. I don't care, Jake said. Let them come. She stared at him, her eyes wide with something between fear and hope. Why are you doing this? He took a breath, stepped closer, and finally, the words escaped his mouth. Words he had carried for too long. Because I care about you, more than I've ever cared about anyone. I think I'm falling in love with you. Veyla didn't move. The stars behind her shimmered, casting her face in silver light. For a moment, she seemed to freeze, like time had stopped just to hear what he'd said. But she didn't respond. She turned slowly, her back facing him again. I need time, she whispered. I wasn't ready to hear that. Jake nodded, though his heart sank. I understand. Veyla began to walk away, but then paused. Without turning, she said one final thing before disappearing into the shadows of the corridor. Your words, they woke something inside me I'd buried long ago. Jake stood alone on the platform, staring out into the galaxy, the echo of her words still burning in his chest. She hadn't said she felt the same, but she hadn't said she didn't. Jake didn't see her for 2 full days after that night beneath the stars. The platform where she had danced now felt cold and empty, like something sacred had been lost to time. He kept going back, waiting, hoping. But she didn't return. The silence between them, once comforting, now felt unbearable. His confession had changed something. He knew it the moment he said the words. And even though she hadn't pushed him away, she had stepped back into her shadows. The station continued its routines. Patrols, cargo checks, signal tracking. Life moved on. But Jake couldn't focus. Every corner of the station reminded him of her. The hallway near the engine room, where she had once placed a tool beside him. The cafeteria where she used to sit, always in the same seat near the wall. Even the air itself, cool, still, and quiet, felt like her presence lingering behind. He kept working. That was all he could do. He fixed systems, rewired circuits, and pretended everything was fine. But deep down, something was breaking. On the 3rd night, the emergency alarm blared. Jake jumped up from bed, pulled on his boots, and rushed to the command deck. Red lights flashed through the hallways. The station trembled under a sudden impact. Unmarked vessel just dropped out of hyperspace, a voice called. No ID code. Alien design. Jake's heart stopped. Veyla. He ran to the viewing deck. Outside, hanging just beyond the station's gravity ring, was a sleek, dark ship, sharp-edged and silver-black, humming with quiet energy. It didn't respond to hails. It didn't fire. It simply hovered in silence, watching. Then came the message, not to the station, to Veyla. She was already in the command deck, armor half on, her expression unreadable. Jake stood behind her as the transmission played. A deep, echoing voice speaking in her language. No one else understood the words, but Jake didn't need to. He saw her reaction. Her shoulders tensed, her jaw tightened, and when the voice stopped, her hands were shaking. They found me, she said softly. The prince sent his warriors. Jake stepped forward. What do they want? They want me to return. They want me to finish the bond, or face judgment. Jake stared at her. You said if they found out about us. They already know. Jake's heart pounded. Then we run. Veyla turned to him. Run where? Anywhere. You saved my life. I won't let them take you. We'll leave together. Her expression twisted, not with fear, but something deeper. Pain. If we run, Earth will see it as betrayal. War could start again. I won't let my people's blood stain your world again. Jake didn't care about politics. He cared about her. What if we fight? She gave him a sad look. We can't win against them. Not with weapons. He shook his head. Then how do we stop them? Veyla closed her eyes. There is one way. A ritual. Ancient. Forgotten. If I declare you as my chosen before their witness, they must honor it. Even the prince cannot deny it. Jake blinked. Chosen. She looked into his eyes. It's a bond, stronger than marriage. It binds two souls through memory, through truth. Jake felt something shift inside him. Then let's do it. But Veyla didn't smile. There's a cost, she whispered. If the bond is false, if our feelings are not pure, both of us will lose everything, even memory. Jake didn't flinch. I know how I feel. Veyla hesitated for a long time. Then she placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. Then we must go to the place of truth. She led him through the ship, through maintenance corridors and forgotten passageways, until they reached a sealed door at the base of the central tower. She pressed her hand to the panel. It scanned her energy, glowed softly, and slid open with a slow hiss. Inside was a circular chamber, ancient and dark. The floor was etched with symbols like the ones Jake had seen on the moon. Only these were older, more detailed. In the center of the room was a circle of light, pulsing like a heartbeat. This is the chamber of memory, Veyla said. Step inside, and it will reveal your truth. I will step in too. If our truths match, the bond will hold. If not, Jake stepped in without hesitation. The light enveloped him. For a moment, he saw stars exploding, planets forming, entire histories flashing through his mind. Then everything went quiet, and suddenly, he was back in the corridor where he first saw her. He wasn't dreaming. The chamber was pulling memories from deep inside him, moments he didn't even know he had kept. Her eyes the first time she looked at him. The way her fingers touched his forehead that day. The way she danced under starlight. The way his heart raced whenever she walked into a room. And then, her. Veyla, not as a warrior, not as a guard, but as a soul, lonely, lost, and strong. Jake stepped forward and reached for her, his memory self doing what his real self had only dreamed of. He told her the truth. He loved her. The chamber trembled. In the real world, Jake gasped as the light faded. He dropped to his knees, breathing hard. Veyla stood across from him, her face pale. I saw your truth, she whispered. Jake looked up, and tears ran down her cheeks, slow, silver, and silent. You meant every word. The air shifted. The symbols on the floor glowed bright, and the circle between them pulsed faster. Above, an ancient light flickered to life, casting both of their shadows into one shape. It was done. The bond was real. But the peace didn't last. A sharp noise echoed through the station. Metal boots, weapons charging. Jake and Veyla turned together. The prince's warriors had arrived. The silence shattered. Heavy boots hit the steel floors of the station like war drums. Jake and Veyla stood frozen in the chamber of memory, the glow of their newly formed bond still pulsing gently around them. The warmth between them, the silent truth they had finally accepted, was already being hunted. Jake reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Outside the chamber, the sound of voices in Kaleri echoed through the corridors, sharp commands and clipped orders. They weren't here to negotiate. They had come with purpose, with weapons, with judgment. Veyla's face hardened. Her expression returned to the mask she wore before Jake knew her. Cold, warrior, unreadable. But her hand never left his. They'll try to separate us, she said softly, her voice steady. They'll tell you this bond means nothing. That you were manipulated. That I was confused. I know what's real, Jake said. I know you. A moment later, the door burst open. 6 figures in dark armor stormed in, weapons drawn. Their helmets glowed with shifting lines, and each step echoed like thunder in the small chamber. One of them stepped forward, taller than the rest, shoulders broad, face uncovered. Jake could tell right away. This was the prince. His skin was pale gold, and his eyes burned with silent fire. He didn't need to raise his voice. The room obeyed him just by his presence. Veyla, he said, you've broken the code. Veyla's hand tightened in Jake's. She said nothing. You bonded with a human, the prince continued. A betrayal to your bloodline, to your house, to your ancestors. I chose, she said, her voice clear. And I choose still. Jake watched the prince's jaw tighten. You were meant for me, the prince said. That was sealed in birth and memory. You dishonor our past. Veyla stepped forward. I chose to honor the truth, and my truth is not you. One of the guards raised a weapon. Jake instinctively moved in front of her, though he knew he wouldn't survive even a single shot. The prince raised a hand, stopping the guard. There is still time, he said. Break the bond. Come back. This human doesn't understand what he's done. Jake took a step forward, heart pounding. I knew exactly what I was doing. The prince turned his gaze to Jake. Then you understand the price. You claim her as your chosen, but do you even know who she truly is? Jake looked at Veyla, uncertain. I know she left her people for freedom. The prince let out a low laugh, cold and sharp. She didn't leave for freedom. She ran after being accused of heresy. She didn't just reject the bond. I did not reject her. She was sentenced. She escaped. Jake looked at Veyla. She hadn't told him this. Veyla's voice didn't waver. I rejected your kingdom of chains. You stole the ancient knowledge, the prince snapped. You entered the forbidden chamber. You unlocked the gate. Jake's blood ran cold. What gate? Veyla lowered her eyes. There's a reason I knew about the memory bond. Why I knew how to summon it. I wasn't just promised to the prince. I was trained to be his keeper, the one who remembers, the one who holds the ancestral truth. She looked at Jake, her voice trembling now. But the truth I found, it wasn't what they told us. The memory stone spoke of freedom, of choosing love, not obeying it. I read it. I believed it. Jake felt the weight of her words. She had stolen something sacred. She had broken laws carved in stone, all for a chance to love freely. The prince stepped closer. We should kill you both for what you've done. But you won't, Jake said, because the bond is complete. Ancient law protects it. You'd lose your throne for violating it. The prince's silence was confirmation. Veyla looked at Jake, then turned to the prince one last time. We're leaving. You won't get far. Veyla raised her hand, and in a flash of movement, pulled a glowing disc from her armor. It pulsed once, and an energy wave burst outward, knocking the guards off their feet. The prince stood firm, but even he flinched as the light exploded through the chamber. Jake and Veyla ran. They raced through the halls, alarms screaming behind them. Guards recovered fast, chasing close behind. The station shuddered as systems began shutting down one by one, locked down by the prince's crew. Escape routes were closing. Jake led them toward the old hangar bay, where unused shuttles were stored. Veyla's breathing was shallow, but her focus never wavered. As they turned the final corner, a blast struck the wall beside them. Jake was thrown against the bulkhead, his vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw Veyla on the ground, blood running down her side. Veyla, he shouted, dragging himself to her. She coughed, barely able to speak. Keep going. Don't stop. No, Jake said, pulling her up. I won't leave you. He got her into the shuttle, hands shaking, mind racing. He sealed the doors and launched without clearance. The station's defenses fired, but Veyla overrode them with a stolen passcode. They broke free, flames licking the shuttle's side, alarms blaring. As the stars swallowed them, Veyla slumped in the passenger seat. Jake held her hand. Stay with me, please. Her voice was barely a whisper. Even if I don't, you must remember. Don't let them erase me. I won't, Jake said, tears burning his eyes. You're part of me now. She looked at him, her expression soft. You were the only choice I ever made for myself. And then her eyes closed. Jake screamed her name, holding her tight as the stars rushed past the window. He didn't know if she would live, but he knew what they had was real, and he would fight the galaxy to keep it. The stars outside the shuttle windows passed like silent witnesses, watching the stolen craft flee across the endless dark. Jake sat motionless in the pilot's chair, hands clenched on the controls, though they trembled slightly. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, but it couldn't drown out the pounding of his heart. Behind him, Veyla lay still, too still, her breathing shallow, skin paler than he had ever seen it. She hadn't spoken since she closed her eyes. Jake kept glancing at her through the rear screen, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. Each breath was a quiet battle. The wound on her side had stopped bleeding, but she had lost too much. The station's medkits were crude, and Jake had done his best, but it wasn't enough. She needed real care, alien care. Her biology wasn't human. He could guess, but he couldn't save her with just guesses. He opened the nav charts, hands shaking, and searched for the only place that might help them now. The Outer Reach, a fringe colony where exiles, outlaws, and healers lived under no flag. It was dangerous, wild, and unprotected, but it was their only chance. The shuttle responded, engines groaning as they veered toward the edge of known space. Every hour passed like a year. Jake didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just flew, stared at her, and whispered to her even though she couldn't hear him. "You'll be okay. You have to be. You're stronger than this." She didn't answer, but she was alive, and that was enough to keep going. When they finally reached the Reach, the shuttle was on its last tank of fuel. The planet below was gray and rough, clouds swirling thick above shattered landscapes. No cities, just camps, ruins, and the scattered lights of distant settlements. Jake sent a signal on the emergency channel, not knowing if anyone would hear or care. To his surprise, a voice answered. Crackling. Strange. Old. Land on Grid 6. Come alone. No weapons. If she is who we think, we will help. Jake didn't question. He just did as told. They landed on a flat plateau surrounded by cliffs. Strange figures emerged from the mist, some tall and thin, others covered in cloaks and armor pieces from different worlds. Among them was a woman with soft gray skin and glowing yellow eyes. She walked straight toward the shuttle, her steps slow but steady. Jake opened the door and stepped out, holding up his hands. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "She's dying. Please, help her." The woman looked past him, into the shuttle. Then she nodded once. "Bring her." Jake carried Veyla in his arms, her weight frighteningly light. The woman led them through narrow paths and into a hidden structure carved from stone and metal. Inside was warm, lit by strange lights that pulsed like heartbeat rhythms. He laid Veyla on a table, and the healers surrounded her without a word. Jake stepped back, hands still red from her blood. Hours passed. He waited in silence. The woman returned and sat beside him. "You bonded with her," she said. "Not a question. A fact." Jake nodded slowly. "You understand what that means." "I do now." The woman studied him for a moment, then spoke with something close to respect. "She is not just a warrior. She carries old knowledge. Forbidden blood. Do you know what she risked by choosing you?" Jake looked up. "Do you know what I would have lost if she hadn't?" The woman smiled faintly. "You speak like a man who has already lost much." Jake didn't answer. Later that night, they allowed him to see her. She was awake, but only barely. Her eyes opened when he entered. Slow, weak, but alive. Jake sat beside her, holding her hand. "You made it," he whispered. Veyla smiled faintly. "I followed the light." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "Don't scare me like that again." She didn't speak, just let her hand rest on his cheek, warm and soft. In the days that followed, she recovered slowly. The healers gave her strange medicines, root extracts and glowing serums, drawn from creatures Jake didn't recognize. But it worked. Her strength returned piece by piece, Her color came back, and her voice grew stronger. And through it all, Jake stayed close. He never asked her to explain more. Not yet. But when she was strong enough, she told him everything. The truth he hadn't known. The truth her people had buried. Long ago, before the war, her ancestors had once lived among humans, long before records were kept. Bonds had formed then, not through power or politics, but through shared emotion, through something real. But as generations passed, those memories were hidden. Her people had sealed them away, fearing weakness. They built a new culture on control, honor, and arranged bonds that had nothing to do with love. And Veyla, born into a royal line, had discovered a fragment of that old truth, a broken stone, a forgotten ritual. And she had dared to follow it. "I always thought I was alone," she said one evening, sitting under the sky beside Jake, "even among my own people. But you made me feel seen." Jake reached for her hand. "You made me believe again." Then came the signal, a ping on the outer sensors, a coded message. Not from the prince, from Earth. Jake opened the console and read it out loud. Unauthorized escape. Treaty violation. Human subject, Jake Mason, accused of aiding an interspecies criminal. You are to surrender. If you return with her willingly, your charges may be dropped. Veyla stood behind him. "They're offering you a way out," she said. Jake stared at the message, then deleted it without hesitation. "I already made my choice." Veyla stepped closer. "If we stay, we'll always be hunted." "Then let them hunt," Jake said. "We're not running anymore." A new silence settled between them. Not fear, not uncertainty. Conviction. That night, they stood on the cliffside and looked out over the alien horizon. A soft wind moved through the stone arches, and stars shimmered like distant watchers above. Veyla rested her head against his shoulder, and Jake placed an arm around her waist. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They had survived betrayal, wounds, exile, and memory. And now they would face what came next, together. The stars over the reach burned cold and bright, stretching forever across the sky. From the rocky cliffs where Jake and Veyla stood, the galaxy looked distant, almost peaceful, like a dream too far to touch. But peace was only on the surface. Beneath it, storms were gathering. And somewhere in that vastness, the prince was coming. They both knew it. He would not accept defeat. He would not let Veyla disappear into myth. And he would never forgive a human for breaking a sacred bond once promised to royalty. Jake spent his days repairing old tech in the settlement, trading parts, building defenses. He helped the locals build shields around the healing caves, restored signal scramblers, and reinforced the cliff sensors with metal pulled from forgotten wrecks. The people of the Reach were tough, scattered, and strange. But they understood survival. And when they heard who Veyla was, who she had chosen, they didn't question it. They just began preparing. Veyla, still healing, walked the perimeter each morning. She wore no armor now, just a simple gray robe. But Jake could see it in her eyes. The warrior was still there, just quieter, calmer. Her silence was no longer a wall between them but a bond. They spoke without speaking, felt each other's thoughts in the smallest gestures. Every touch, every glance, carried meaning. One night, as they sat beneath the stars, she said softly, "If he comes, it won't be with just words. It will be war." Jake nodded. "Then let it be. You may not survive it. I already survived losing you once. I won't do it again." She smiled, small, warm, and sad. "You're not a fighter, Jake." He looked at her, voice quiet but certain. "No, but I'm yours." And that was enough. 3 days later, the sky split open. The prince's warship descended like a falling star, carving fire into the gray clouds above the Reach. It hovered low, casting a deep shadow over the cliffs, its hull marked with ancient runes and the insignia of the royal house. It didn't fire. Not yet, but the message was clear. Come out, or be erased. Jake and Veyla stood at the edge of the settlement, facing the monstrous ship. Dust blew around them. The people gathered behind, silent, waiting. The prince stepped forward, flanked by 10 warriors in dark armor. His gaze swept the cliffs, his eyes burning with pride and fury. When he saw Veyla, he paused, and when he saw Jake beside her, his lips curled into a sneer. "So this is the future you chose," the prince said. "Dust and dirt, a life among cowards." Veyla took a step forward. "A life that is mine, a truth that is mine. You were born to rule beside me. I was born to choose, and I choose him." Jake didn't move. He knew he couldn't match the prince's strength, his power, or his weapons. But he didn't have to. His strength was something else. The prince raised a hand. "You bonded with him, but the ancient bond only holds if it is witnessed by the guardians." They watched, Veyla said. "The chamber of memory accepted us." The prince's face darkened. "Then you leave me no choice." He turned to his warriors. "Take the human. Kill the rest." The guards moved forward, and Jake stepped in front of Veyla, holding nothing but a simple beacon, a memory stone, drawn from the same vault Veyla had once unlocked. He held it high, and it pulsed with light. A low hum filled the air. The prince froze. The warriors stopped. Veyla whispered, "Where did you find it?" Jake glanced at her. "You left it in your satchel." The prince's eyes narrowed. "You dare use our sacred relics against us?" Jake's voice was calm. "You use them to control. We use them to remember." The memory stone pulsed again, brighter now. Symbols formed in the air, images of the past, of Veyla as a child, learning the old truths, of the forbidden bond rituals, of 2 souls, 1 human, 1 Kalari, joining hands beneath the stars. The warriors looked up, confused. Their prince had told them the old stories were lies, that humans were beneath them, that love was weakness. But now they saw the truth, and truth was harder to silence than any enemy. The prince raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a new sound echoed across the cliffs. A ship, human design, broke through the clouds and hovered beside the warship. Earth colors, Earth symbol. It was a patrol ship from command. Jake's old message, sent before they fled, had been received after all. A voice crackled through the comms. "Stand down. This is Earth Authority. The human Jake Mason and the Kalari Veyla are under protection. Any attempt to harm them will be treated as an act of war." The prince turned slowly, rage etched across his face. "You will regret this," he hissed. But he was outnumbered, outwitnessed, outloved. He stepped back, hissed an order to his guards, and turned away. His warship rose in silence, fire glowing beneath its belly. And within seconds, it was gone, vanishing into the clouds. Jake didn't move for a long time. Then, finally, he let out a breath. Veyla took his hand in hers. They walked back through the cliffs, past the people, past the dust and stone, into the light. A year passed. Harich became something new, no longer just a refuge, but a sanctuary. Humans and aliens came there to speak, to remember, to heal. The bond Jake and Veyla had shared became more than just their own. It became a symbol, a reminder that love didn't need permission, that truth didn't need a throne, and that 2 souls from 2 worlds could still find each other in the dark. One night, beneath the same sky where they had once stood side by side in fear, Jake and Veyla sat together again. She rested her head on his shoulder. He looked at her and softly said, "I used to think I was alone in this universe." She smiled. "You were never alone. You were just waiting." He took her hand. "I love you." This time, she didn't hesitate. "I loved you, even before I knew what love was." Above them, a star blinked into life. And in the silence that followed, no words were needed, because their story was already written in the stars. Forever.